Good Monday afternoon. I'm digital anchor Brandi Smith. It has been a very busy weekend of new information pouring out of Uvalde, the site of the shooting 8 weeks ago tomorrow that claimed 21 lives, 2 of those teachers, 19 children. For the past 8 weeks, the families impacted and the community as a whole have been demanding answers about how this could have happened in their community. And we got a whole bunch of new information on Sunday. So first, the Texas House Investigative Committee met with family members. Not all family members, we're going to talk about that in a minute. They also released their preliminary report, that committee did, 77 pages, documenting everything from policies and procedures in place at the school to more about the shooter than we've ever learned before, to what happened that day and some of the fallout afterwards, including the communication chaos that families have expressed a lot of concerns about. Not long after that press conference wrapped up, committee members answered questions about the report. Then the city of Uvalde released about 3 hours of edited body camera video from officers who responded to the shooting. The mayor saying that it was in response to DPS releasing that surveillance video that we saw last week. So a lot of ground to cover. I wanted to lay that all out there. I know there are some folks who are frankly overwhelmed by everything that they're seeing and hearing from and about Uvalde. I get it, and that's why I wanted to give you the opportunity, the warning of what we're going to talk about, so you can make that decision to scroll, because some of the information is really troubling. Most of the information about this case is really troubling. How could it not be? We're 2 teachers losing their lives. We're talking about a community 8 weeks on that is still really struggling because it hasn't gotten the answers that so many of these parents and community members have demanded. The report answered a lot, but not all, because now there's the push for accountability. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. I do want to open this conversation up to comments. Please be respectful. There are a lot of people who are very angry, rightfully so. There are a lot of people who are very hurt, rightfully so. And I know tempers can flare when we're talking about something like this. So if you have a question, I would just ask that you please be respectful. And folks who are jumping on to answer other folks, I'm going to ask you to do something, and I haven't done it in a while, but just to remind, if you are answering with what you believe to be a fact, I would please ask that you include the link where you heard it, where you learned that information. There is still, to this day, 8 weeks later, a lot of misinformation about the shooting. Some of it's intentional, some of it's not, some of it's rumors that were flying around. I mean, even today when I shared Anna Yeli Ruiz's story from last night that we're going to get to here in just a moment, people were jumping on and commenting about family dynamics. Let's just try to be as factual and respectful as possible.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to start with a story from Anna Yeli Ruiz, who for 8 weeks has been to Uvalde many times, has developed connections and relationships with the families of some of these victims. And she was there early in the afternoon when these families were supposed to meet with members of the investigative committee. Not everyone was allowed in. Here's her story from last night.
It was yet another day filled with lots of anger and frustration for the families of Uvalde. For almost 8 weeks, they've been waiting for answers to try and figure out what happened inside the school on that terrible day. Sunday, they went to the junior college to finally meet with the Texas House committee members to discuss the investigation.
Hopefully, after all the facts come out and all the information is collected, that they'll find who was to be held responsible for that, and we'll we'll start the healing process.
But some parents weren't allowed past the door. Turns out they weren't on a list.
I was really mad. I told them there that I was father to one of the deceased, and they said that my name wasn't on the list and I wasn't welcome there, that I had to get out. And I don't know who was overseeing that, but it's not right. I'm mad. I feel like they're making a mockery of me being a parent or the relationship that I have with my daughter, and I'm super mad about it.
Emery Joe Garza's dad wasn't the only one that was kicked out. Annabelle Rodriguez's dad also was not allowed inside.
Answer what happened to my baby, and now I'm not going to know what happened, because I wasn't on the list.
When we asked the mayor of Uvalde why some parents weren't allowed inside, this is what he had to say.
You're asking me something that you need to be talking to them and to the rest of the family. I have no control over that.
So who's inviting these families to these events?
The families made the list of who was coming to that deal.
So the families get to pick and choose who gets information?
It was immediate family that were allowed there. Again, you're asking me something that I can't tell you on the parents.
They're telling me they're pointing fingers at you, so that's what
Well, I mean, point the fingers at me.
But again, the families left with one goal in mind.
Somebody needs to be held accountable. Who that is, I don't know. We're going to find out.
Well, the families tell us they'll continue to push for accountability. They'll attend all the meetings necessary to get that, even if they do get kicked out. And by the way, later on today, there is a school board meeting where we expect to see a packed house. Reporting in Uvalde, Anayeli Ruiz, KHOU 11 News.
That school board meeting is tonight, and Anayeli will be there. You heard about the push for accountability. When asked about that yesterday, the chair of this committee, Representative Dustin Burrows, said that was not the mission of his committee. He said there are other legislative committees that will take further action, but that his was just fact-finding. They were determined to find out how what happened. And the details of this report, again, it's 77 pages. We have it linked on KHOU.com if you want to read the full thing, all, I believe, 7 chapters of it. But Cheryl Mercedes is giving us a breakdown.
There were 376 law enforcement officers at Robb Elementary School from 23 different agencies. And the report from the Texas House of Representatives Investigative Committee found that there were, quote, systemic failures that went far beyond one person or one local police force. Chaos, cluster, 2 words used by officers to describe the more than 1 hour police response to Robb Elementary. The committee's report indicates no one took command of the scene. The school's active shooter policy, which was signed by school district police chief Pete Arredondo, stated the chief will become the person in control of the efforts of all law enforcement and first responders that arrive at that scene. But Arredondo testified, while you're in there, you don't title yourself. My approach was responding as an officer. Chief Arredondo testified that he immediately began to think of the attacker as being cornered and the situation as one of a barricaded subject and didn't think there were kids in the classroom. But according to audio from Sergeant Coronado's body camera, he later contradicts himself.
What we did, we cleared off the rest of the building so we wouldn't have any more besides what's in there, obviously.
While there was miscommunication among responders, the committee also noted several breakdowns in the school's security protocols. One being, had school personnel locked the doors as the school's policy required, that could have slowed his progress long enough to receive alerts, hide children, and lock doors. The attacker entered through the west entrance of the school, but the committee learned the exterior doors on the east and south sides of the building were also unlocked. The attacker still would have had the ability to enter the building. A coach reported shots fired over the radio, but when the principal tried to use an app to notify the school, she had difficulty making the alert because of a bad Wi-Fi signal, and she never tried to communicate the lockdown over the school's intercom. As for the gunman, the committee reports the attacker had no experience with firearms and that the shooting was likely the first time he fired one. And the shooting took place in the shooter's former 4th grade classroom, where his former teacher testified he claimed to be a victim of bullying. The committee also reported it disagrees with a recent report by the National Alert Center, which revealed an officer outside of the school was within firing range of the suspect before he entered the building, but waited for permission from a supervisor to shoot. The state committee learned through witness testimony that that was not the suspect, but rather a coach who was ushering kids into the school. Back to you.
There's so much in this report. That is just the tip of the iceberg. One of the big questions that we have heard over and over again from people is how did this kid afford the money for the firepower he walked into the school with? And that is laid out. I want to say it starts on page 33 of the report. It says he was living at home with his mother initially, then he moved in with his grandmother. Either way, had no real expenses as he wasn't paying rent, he wasn't buying food. He also worked 2 different fast food jobs. And the report says he was hoarding money. His family thought he was doing so to save up for an apartment or a car. But then in the last few months of 2021 into 2022, he started making purchases. First online. At the end of 2021, he bought more in February of 2022. And then we now know in the week before the shooting, he bought those 2 rifles after he had turned 18. The gun shop owner said that he didn't have any red flags. He saw this kid twice. The gunman's uncle brought the gunman to the gun shop both times, and the shooter spent about $3,000 at this gun shop. All protocol was followed. In the report, it notes that none of the transactions were illegal, and that the suspect got his hands on, like I said, this firepower legally. All just about a week before the shooting in Uvalde happened. I mentioned body cam video. So last week we saw the surveillance video that was released by DPS a little bit outside of Robb Elementary and then inside that hallway. The mayor of Uvalde announced sort of abruptly last night that in response he felt compelled to release edited body cam footage from Uvalde officers. Marcelino Benito shows us what's on that.
Shots fired in the building. I heard somebody say someone was shot in the head.
Chaos and confusion.
Hey, we're going in or we're staying here? What are we doing?
As 25 Uvalde police officers descended on Robb Elementary from multiple directions.
Oh, shots fired! 701. Get inside! Go, go, go!
No hesitation as Officer Coronado seen rushing towards the campus. Video released last week from hallway surveillance cameras captured activity on the north side of the building. We watch officers storm in and approach the door, but soon take fire and retreat.
Am I bleeding? Am I bleeding? Am I bleeding?
Officer Canales' body camera captured the moment the gunman shot towards them, and they backed away to safety.
That's my wife's classroom.
Teacher Eva Morales' husband, UCISD Officer Ruben Ruiz, was in that hallway too. The urgency clearly heard in Canales' voice.
Dude, we gotta get in there. The DPS is sitting there. We gotta get in there. He just keeps shooting.
More officers arrive on that side of the campus. They're captured on Jesus Mendoza's body cam.
Police department. It's the police.
As they begin searching classrooms for students, DPS rescues the boy who initially spotted the gunman hiding in the restroom. He's rushed out to safety. On the opposite end of the campus was Officer Coronado. When he first stormed into the building, you see a dust cloud after the shooter fired his first 100 rounds. 20 minutes later, his camera gives us a look at the rescue effort underway.
Go, run over there.
As students pulled out of windows to safety. Officers also check for students inside classrooms. Rooms dark, backpacks and books left behind when the shooting started. It's Coronado's cam that provides our first look at UCISD Chief Pete Arredondo in the hallway on the south side of the building. Minutes later, the chief and another officer seen trying to unlock a classroom. Multiple keys tried, none of them worked. Meanwhile, the clock kept ticking. At 12:21, nearly an hour after first officers arrived on scene, more shots are fired. No one moves in again. Instead, you hear officers trying to communicate with the shooter.
Mr. Ramos, can you hear us? Mr. Ramos, please don't hurt anyone. These are innocent children.
Despite muffled responses earlier, hard to hear on the body cam, this time the shooter didn't respond. 5 minutes later, Arredondo again on camera on the phone. 7 minutes later, Border Patrol's tactical unit moved in to kill the shooter at 12:50, 73 minutes after first officers stepped foot inside that building.
It's a lot to digest. I know. It's hard to watch those videos. It's hard to hear this new information. But it's all steps toward what these families are asking for, and that is accountability. And so I guess the question to you all is, what do you anticipate to come out of the next round of legislative committees? This one said it did its job, it did the fact-finding, and what happens next will be the task of another legislative committee. I know there's a lot of anger in the comments, just as there is in the community. I grew up in a town not much larger than Uvalde. Uvalde is about 16,000. My hometown's 20. Everybody knew everybody. And when the UCC shooting happened in Roseburg, in my hometown, I knew one of the victims directly, but you knew just about everyone indirectly. You can't not in a community that small. A lot of large families, cousins who were killed in that classroom. We want answers too. And I know we're not getting them at the rate we want them. But the reason that we have devoted resources to this story is to get them. And it will take time. We have filed dozens of public records requests. The agencies, local, state, federal, have all forwarded those on now to the Texas Attorney General's office, who has the final decision about whether the agencies have to respond to our Freedom of Information Act requests. But we are trying. This report does give some answers, some explanation. So I would really encourage you, if you can stomach it, to go through those 77 pages. You know, actually all 77 are not necessary. The first 2 chapters are really just background on why the committee was set up in the first place. But there's a lot of detail there, so much that we will have team coverage coming up on the 411 as well as KHOU 11 News at 5 and 6 tonight, just breaking out what we can between the report and the press conference and the meeting with families and the body cameras. We just want to make sure we're covering it comprehensively and respectfully. So I would really encourage you to stay tuned. Here in about 35 minutes, we're going to have the 411, again, team coverage that will continue all night long. We have had continued coverage since yesterday afternoon, so if you want to get caught up, I know most of us disconnected over the weekend, and this wasn't top of mind. But if you want to see our coverage from yesterday, you can always go to our KHOU 11 YouTube channel, or you can go to our KHOU 11 Plus apps on Roku and Fire TV. We have a whole playlist with our coverage of Uvalde. You can also go to khou.com/Uvalde, and that has at least the articles to provide a little more context if you don't want to sit down and actually watch the television story. So here's that visual reminder, all the different ways that you can watch, and we will not stop pressing for answers, because those 21 people deserve answers.